Number 1. How I found out about Santa Claus. I don't really celebrate Christmas anymore, so I guess I'm okay with telling this story. It happened when I was 7 and scarred me for life. 40 years later, I still cannot make myself even a little happy during the Christmas season. I loved Christmas when I was a young boy. Even though I was young when I quit enjoying it, I still have very fond memories of the ones that I did enjoy. I loved going to the shopping center to sit in Santa's lap and having an elf give me a candy cane. I liked watching the Christmas specials on TV. Rudolph was of course my favorite, but I also was very fond of A Charlie Brown Christmas. But the thing I loved the best about the season was the Christmas tree. When a Christmas tree is lit up correctly, with those multicolored lights and an angel on top, and then you turn out the lights in the room, nothing was ever more beautiful than seeing those lights reflect off the wall. It was magic to me. I shared a room with my older brother growing up. He was 2 years older than me and pretty typical for an older brother. He didn't believe in Santa and tried to get me to quit believing in him too. My own belief was so strong that it never worked, but that didn't deter him. He even once snuck me into our parents' room to show me the massive toys that were in their closet. In his mind, that was definite proof that there was no Santa Claus because our parents bought all the toys. I was able to rationalize it though in a way that didn't kill my belief in the fat old man. I just told myself that parents probably bought some of the toys and that Santa Claus brings the rest. On that Christmas Eve when I was 7, as usual, our parents sent us to bed early. It was always so hard to get to sleep on Christmas Eve, but after a lot of tossing and turning, the tiredness finally took over and I passed out. We didn't have a clock in our room, so I really have no idea what time it was later when something woke me up. The only thing that I did know is it was still night because it was completely dark. I groaned, groggy and tired, and then flipped over in an attempt to fall back asleep. No sooner had I closed my eyes, but I heard a noise. I perked up and listened closer. It sounded like somebody messing around by the Christmas tree, because it was a rustling of paper. I sat up in bed and listened closer, and confirmed that was what I was hearing. Someone was in the living room, and messing around the Christmas tree. Well, it didn't take a genius to realize that it was Santa who was in the other room. I mean, who else would be fooling around the Christmas tree in the middle of the night? I was excited because it confirmed that I could soon sneak out of bed and out of my room and then be the first person in the house to see all the presents under the tree. But then a thought occurred to me. Even better than seeing the toys first, if I woke my brother up, I would be able to prove to him that there was a Santa Claus. And it would feel so good to stick it to him, old Mr. Know-It-All. I got out of bed and I tiptoed over to my brother's bed and I tried to wake him up. I knew I had to be quiet so I didn't alert Santa that I knew he was in the house. I lightly shook my brother in an attempt to wake him. He didn't respond the first time. I shook him again, and he still didn't respond. I began to panic just a little bit because I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to wake him up and I wouldn't be able to prove to him that Santa did exist. So I took a chance and whispered his name to him as I shook him a little bit more. Well, that worked, and my brother opened his eyes and looked at me. I told him that I heard Santa in the living room, and he just told me to go back to bed. I insisted that it was Santa, and he got irritated with me. He told me to just go out the door and peek down the hallway, and then I would see that it was just our parents in the living room. I knew he was wrong, so I decided to do just as my brother told me to. Quietly, I crept out the door and tiptoed down the hallway. All the lights in the house were out, except for the lights of the Christmas tree, which illuminated the entire living room. I had to be quiet because I was sure that Santa had superhuman hearing, and I did not wish to alert him. When I got to the corner of the hallway, my whole body trembling with excitement, I narrowly peeked around the corner, and then I saw my parents setting Christmas presents around the tree. My heart sank lower than it ever had before. My brother was right. Santa didn't exist, and the presents all came from my parents. I felt like I lost all of the magic of Christmas as I stood right there, looking at them. I watched them finish their work, completely unaware that I was viewing the entire thing. Then, once the underside of the tree had been filled with gifts, my parents slipped down the hallway that led to their own room. I was crushed, of course. What kid wouldn't have been? After allowing this terrible turn of events to process in my mind, I headed back to my bedroom. I wasn't sure how long I had been standing there, watching my parents pretend to be Santa Claus, but I knew it was a while. The only solace I had was that my brother was likely asleep by that point, and I wouldn't have to face him immediately about what had happened. I slowly opened the door to our room, tiptoed into it, and closed the door. Turning to look at my brother's bed, my eyes took just a few moments to adjust to the lighting. But when they did, I saw that my brother wasn't in his bed. I looked around quickly, thinking he might have been behind the door or in the closet, waiting to scare me when I came back into the room. Instead, what I saw was the window to our bedroom completely open. And my brother was at the window, being held by a tall man, with his hand over my brother's mouth. He was holding my brother, whose eyes were wide and filled with what I assumed was fear. I'd never seen my brother scared before. I didn't get a good look at the guy, as he was already mostly out the window and turned away from me. He likely hadn't even seen me as he quietly creeped back into the room. I only saw the scene for mere seconds before the man was completely out the window, my brother in tow. I tried screaming, but no sound would come out. I froze, too terrified to do anything. I was 7 years old. What could I do? Thinking back on the instance, I knew I should have run to the window to see what was happening, or run to my parents' room and tell them what happened, or simply start screaming at the top of my lungs, and the screaming would have been more than enough to get my parents to come into the room, and they could have stopped the man who was taking my brother on Christmas Eve. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I ran to the corner of the room, scared to death for my own life. I sank into the corner and stayed there, who knows how long, not making a sound or doing anything as the Christmas sun came up. But it wasn't Christmas anymore. It was just a bad day. My parents came into the room and found me too traumatized to tell them what had happened. They found my brother gone, and they called the cops. You might be wondering why someone would share a story like this on a horror channel on YouTube. Well, the ending is not as sad as it might seem. My brother was not lost forever. The police eventually caught up with the man, and in about 2 weeks my brother, much worse for the wear but still alive, was returned. But it was too late for me to ever come back from that experience. For years, Christmas Eve only brought nightmares my way. I never got over the horror of that experience. Ironically, my brother did. He has a wife, and he has kids, and they always enjoy Christmas. But me, well, Christmas is a holiday where we celebrate and supposedly let a make-believe man come into our house and bring things to us. Well, I had a real man come into my house on Christmas Eve and try to take something from us. I don't like either idea anymore. Number 2. The Christmas Shed. Christmas is such a weird holiday. I don't mean the religious part of it, or the commercial part of it, or even the shopping part of it. None of that really bothers me too much. What doesn't make sense to me is how we completely redecorate our homes simply to accommodate one day out of the year. A lot of times it takes more time to actually do the decorating for Christmas than it takes for Christmas to actually happen. And doesn't anyone think it's weird that we put a pine tree in our house and hang things on it? It's just ridiculous. When I was a teenager, my parents actually had a shed in the backyard that was only for Christmas decorations. They didn't keep anything else in there. They had everything you could think of: trees, wreaths, garland, lawn ornaments, more lights than you could possibly ever imagine one person having. During the summer when I was 16 years old, my 10-year-old sister was playing hide-and-seek with her friends in the field behind our house. There were about 5 girls and 4 boys playing with her. I was supposed to be watching her because my parents were not at home. My girlfriend called me though at one point, and I thought the kids would be fine if I let them alone for a while. So I went into the house and I talked to her. I am not sure how long I was in the living room talking when my sister came into the house. She was visibly distressed. Immediately concerned, I asked my sister what was going on. She told me that there was a witch in the Christmas shed. Apparently, she had tried to hide in the shed while they were playing, and the woman shooed her out, screaming and cursing at her. I told my sister to come with me, but she didn't want to. I was going to check and see if somebody was indeed in the Christmas shed. I had to convince my sister that it was safer to come with me than to be in the house by herself. She eventually agreed and came with me. I grabbed my baseball bat and crowded my sister behind me. All of the kids were still outside playing, and they all got very curious when they saw an older boy out there holding a baseball bat. All of them came over to the shed. The shed was always left unlocked, which made my sister's story believable. Someone could have gotten in there, although I'm sure it wouldn't have been a witch. I slowly opened the door and looked in. My mom kept her decorations in these large red plastic tubs. I'm sure you've seen things like that at Walmart. Well, they were all stacked neatly on top of each other. Holding the bat, I went into the shed and cautiously checked behind everything. There was nobody in there, and there was no indication that anyone had been in there. I told my sister this, but she swore up and down that there was a witch in there. I humored her by telling her that there may have been, but if there was, she was not there now. She relaxed a little bit. Then, just to make my sister feel safer, I went inside and found a padlock, came back outside and locked the shed. About a month before Christmas and 5 months after this story took place, my mom decided to get everything ready for Christmas. She hadn't known about the padlock, so she asked me about it, and I told her I had locked it up during the summer. I had the key, so I told her I would unlock it and bring all the tubs into the house. My mom had about 15 tubs stacked up in that shed. I began bringing them into the house. After I had gotten about 10 of them in, I picked one up off the floor, and what I saw almost stopped my heart. There was a strange drawing on the floor of the shed. It was under that tub. It was some sort of ritual symbol, a circle with a bunch of weird drawings on it. Sitting around it were 3 burned down candles, and there was some sort of ash, and a small, rusty-looking double-sided knife. I immediately thought about the witch that my sister had claimed to see, and I was seriously shaken up as I picked up the next tub and carried it into the house. Before I went back out to get the last 4 tubs, I took my mom to the side and told her about what I'd found. She was distressed a bit, but praised me for locking the shed up. We figured that whomever my sister had seen in the shed must have left before I went back out there, and she wasn't able to retrieve her belongings after I locked it up. I went back into the shed and picked up the next tub. As I was exiting the shed, I heard my mother screaming in the house. Panicked, I dropped the tub in the snow and ran into the house to see what was the matter. My mom was standing in the living room, across the room from the tubs. When I asked her what was wrong, she simply pointed to the tub across the room with the lid off. When I walked over there, what was in it was just terrible. The dead and very decayed body of a small animal which I took to be a cat, with its limbs cut off, was lying in the tub. I don't know whether that woman was a witch or not, but whomever she was, she had some pretty bad intentions. I'm glad I locked her out. Number 3. Christmas Bot. I'm sort of a lonely person, but it really is not a bad thing. I keep to myself a lot because I just like having my privacy. But even though I'm by myself, I still get things all decorated for Christmas because I just love it. I put up a nice Christmas tree right by my living room window so I can look at it all month. It's important to know that when this happened, I lived on the ground floor of an apartment building. My living room faced a side yard, so technically, no one would really see my Christmas tree unless they were walking beside the building. My computer was sitting on a desk, facing the tree. Do you know those clever bots that you can interact with online? You can talk to them through typing and ask them questions, and they will more or less respond. Well, I say more or less because more often than not, they seem to miss the point and don't address the specific topics you bring up. However, they are supposed to learn as you go along and become more human in their responses. Basically, they're a primitive form of artificial intelligence. Well, on Christmas Eve one year, I found one called the Christmas Bot. So, I decided to talk to him for a while to keep me company. While I sat there in front of my computer, I would always try to trip the bot up. Although he didn't have a name, I began calling him Chris, which of course was short for Christmas bot. It was an easy enough name, and I figured if I addressed him enough using it, he would accept it and then eventually answer to it. However, as much as I tried to get him to pick up on the designation, he never did. He would change the subject or wonder why it was I was addressing him as Chris. Me. Hey Chris, how are you doing? Chris. I am doing all right. How are you, Chris? Me. I am not Chris. I am Dean. You are Chris. Chris. Hello, Dean. How is Chris doing? Me. Let's move on. What are you doing tonight? Chris. I am talking to Dean right now. What are you doing? Me. I am talking to Chris right now. Chris. That is great. Who is Chris? It went on and on like this for nearly an hour that night. I was trying really hard to get Chris to recognize his name, and he was just being stubborn, I guess. I was beginning to wonder why I actually spent all this time, wasting all this time, trying to convince a low form of AI that his name was Chris. I guess I just really thought that if I was able to convince him of his name, perhaps if he was capable of learning, maybe he would grow to be something more than his programming. It's not like I expected him to become Watson or something, but it would have been nice if I could at least see him become a reasonable conversationalist. Maybe better than most of my relatives, at least. My attention was diverted from Chris because I thought that I heard a noise in my kitchen. I mentioned I lived alone, so it couldn't have been another person. It sounded like someone had opened up a cabinet and let it shut on its own. I excused myself from Chris to go and look in the kitchen. Me. I'll be back, Chris. Chris. I will wait for you, Chris. I groaned and got up. Walking into the kitchen, I didn't see anything. I looked around and eventually went back to the computer. Me. I am back, Chris. Chris. Welcome back, Chris. Where did you go? Me. I heard something in the kitchen and had to check it out. Chris. What was in the kitchen? Me. Nothing was in the kitchen. Chris. Why was nothing in the kitchen? Me. Never mind, Chris. Chris. I don't mind, Chris. What was in the kitchen? Me. Nothing was in the kitchen. Chris. Why did you go into the kitchen? Me. I heard a noise and I had to check it out. Chris. Are you scared? That was a weird development, and it intrigued me. Chris had gone off his normal responses to ask me something that he never asked me before, and it was totally unrelated to what I said. I was interested. Me. No? Why did you ask me if I was scared? There was a pause before Chris responded. And when he did respond, it seemed he was avoiding the topic again. Chris. I am not scared of dying. Are you scared of dying? I figured that Chris's programming must have related fear and dying somehow. It made sense. So I responded honestly. Me. No, I'm not afraid of dying. Chris paused for a good 30 seconds before he responded. You should be. A chill went down my spine. I mean, it was a reasonable response. Lots of people are afraid of dying. So I responded, "Why should I be afraid of dying?" Chris paused again for about 20 seconds and responded, "You should be afraid of dying." I was really caught off guard again by this. I looked up from my computer at my Christmas tree, and then I saw, looking in the window and only slightly obscured by the branches of the tree, the face of a man dressed as Santa Claus, watching me through the window. Alarmed, I jumped up out of my computer chair. The Santa didn't move though, just kept looking at me. It was disturbing. I didn't know what he wanted. Not knowing what else to do, I ran over to the phone to call the police. I didn't know if the man meant me any harm, but only a nut job would be staring at somebody in their apartment building, not only on Christmas Eve, but dressed as Santa Claus. When I was on the phone, I heard a shattering noise and I completely lost control. The man had broken into my house. I began screaming at the 911 operator who was trying to keep me calm. She told me to tell the man that the police were on their way, and I yelled that at him. Looking around the corner, I saw the man trying to pull his way into the window despite my warning. He was holding what looked to be a hunting knife, and likely used it to break the glass. Fortunately, he stopped when we both heard police sirens in the distance. The man tried pulling out and had some trouble and dropped the knife on my tree skirt on his way out. You know all those Reddit stories where the police never catch the guy? This isn't one of those. The psycho in the Santa suit got caught. I almost wish that he didn't though, because then I wouldn't have found out that he'd been a suspect in the investigation of a murder committed the week before. He was wearing the costume to hide from the cops since it was the Christmas season and figured he could blend in. The only reason he was breaking into my home was to have a place to hide. The fact that it was me was completely random. What bugs me the most about this isn't the coincidence that the Christmas bot said I should be scared, and that I saw somebody looking in my window. I mean, AI learns stuff from a lot of people, and I suspected the other people may have taught it some odd things. But what does bother me is wondering how long that lunatic was sitting there watching me through that window as I typed onto the computer. That gives me chills to this very day. Hey everyone. I was pretty happy to get a few submissions this week regarding Christmas experiences. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have and haven't subscribed yet, please click the button next to my orange yet sadistic mascot. Just an update on how things are going. I'll have my little Christmas Carol video coming out on either Christmas or Christmas Eve, but please know it's really just going to be a couple of minutes to float a little joke I made up about the story. I hope to get another true story video up this week too, but being that it's a holiday week, I can't 100% make any promises. However, if I'm unable to get another 3 true stories out, I'll try to find time to at least get one. For the future, I'll be working on my first collaboration with Joey's Nightmares. Please check out his channel if you haven't, it's really good. I'm also trying to help out one of my subscribers who is trying to start his own scary story channel. His name is Scorpion5219. If you have any scary stories you might like him to narrate, please send them his way. I've included a link for his channel as well. And remember, the noise you hear out by the tree this Christmas Eve might not be Santa Claus. Might be something worse. But it will be something since, especially on Christmas, you're never truly alone. Merry Christmas. And